Hello and welcome to the first episode of the new year 2025 of the CIPD's HR People Pod. Fortnightly podcast bringing you the topical stories and expert insights on issues impacting the people profession itself and the world of work. My name's David D'Souza. I'm Director of Profession at the CIPD, and joining me today in the studio we have...
My name's Andrea Gordon. I am a HR director. I've had over 20 years experience in HR, worked in NHS, education. I was HR director at the Olympic Park and most recently in housing.
Fantastic. Thank you for joining us. And we also have...
Hello, I'm Emma Jayne. I'm the Group People and Culture Director for Kin, a later life living company where I have worked for 2 years. I have worked in people and culture for 30 years, all in luxury hotels until I moved to the later living care space a couple of years ago.
All in luxury hotels. It's plush.
Right. I've been very lucky.
Showing off.
Yeah.
Now, for long-time listeners, you will know that what we normally do is we ask our guests what it is that they've been watching or reading at the start of the programme. However, when we were doing the pre-brief for today's show, it became clear that the only thing anyone's been watching has been Traitors. So for anyone who hasn't seen Traitors, it's a show where a group of people, contestants, locked away in a castle. They have to do tasks together to win money, but they're trying to establish which three people are traitors. So they're people hidden in the group who are eliminating others each night, and which people are faithful. So they are people that are just trying to find the traitors and banish them before they can get picked off and lose the money that's due to the group. It's catching on like wildfire. There are episodes of it around the world. You can stream it wherever you are and wherever you're listening to it. So we decided to basically try and change this into a Traitors themed episode for the entire thing. We are all faithful in this room. I want to be really clear on that. I'm 100% faithful. There may be some traitorish behaviour as we go through. But that was the general premise. So first of all, it's your... I'm going to come to you both to kind of give your general observations around the psychology of it and why you enjoy it and how close to real work is being locked away in a castle, trying to pick off who isn't trustworthy and who is. But it's your first time watching it this year, isn't
Yes,
it?
I am new to the Traitors. I have been obsessively watching Claudia Winkleman's outfits over the previous seasons, but I haven't managed to persuade my husband, who works in IT, so a very different job to me, to watch it, but he caved, and I've very quickly become obsessed with it. I think the dynamics of it really do mirror the workplace. Not that we want to be murdering each other. Well, I don't know, maybe not that we want to be murdering each other. But I think there's so many lessons to be learned on trust, on observing human behaviour and strategy. But I'm literally 4 episodes in and I can't get enough of it.
Yeah, I've watched all 3 seasons so far, so I'm a huge Traitors fan. Keen on looking at, again, the psychology of how they work. I think even if you're a traitor or a faithful, you have to work together to get the money. So I think that, really mirrors how we work in the workplace. No matter what team you're in, what department you work in, you have to come together to, achieve that end goal. But yeah, absolutely love it. I would love to be a traitor, I think.
I think I would as well. Yeah. So I haven't. Oh no, we're not going to talk about last night's episode, are we? No.
We're
okay.
Not. So
fine.
Just to be really clear, I've had to work a couple of evenings this week. I haven't been able to see all of the episodes. So I've asked both of the people here with me today not to give away spoilers because it will spoil my entire day as I'm settling down with my daughter to watch it later. So no, let's not talk about specific episodes. However, you mentioned trust being a kind of really important part of it. And I think what's really interesting is how rapidly people come to a conclusion that they can trust people or they can't trust people based on no real information apart from really small signals. And I was just wondering, do you think that's like the workplace, or is it a kind of turbocharged version of that?
I think it's turbocharged, but I'm fascinated by this part in particular because I just because I'm new to it, I don't really know what's about to happen, but I was so curious because when they get it wrong, when they vote somebody out, do they reflect on that? Do they refine their practice to say, well, why did we choose him or her? And Yeah, I haven't got to that stage yet in the program, so maybe you can help me, because I'm kind of really hoping that they learn and they reflect, and then my husband says, stop being the HR director, just enjoy the program.
I don't know whether there's that much reflection, more frustration.
Yeah, I'm not sure you wouldn't typify it as a learning organisation for anyone who's kind of...
Yeah, I think it's more frustration that they vote out a faithful, they think they've found the traitor, they stand up, they say, no, I'm a faithful, and they're really frustrated. I don't think there's much reflection there afterwards. But I think just going back to your point, David, that they're making a lot of these decisions based on very, very small things.
First impressions.
Yeah. You know, if we think back to business and think back to work and the decisions we make, that are evidence-based decisions, not really much of that goes on in the Traitors. It's, you know, how somebody's looked at somebody across the breakfast table, or how they've performed in a challenge, and they've got their card marked once somebody's got it in their head that they want to banish them.
There's a lot of post-rationalisation, isn't there, as well, which you do get in business, which is, I made the wrong decision, however it was right given the information that I had, or the way that I was thinking about it, or the thing that someone else said to me. And I think there's some really... You say it's a really good study in group dynamics. It's a hyper unrealistic situation, but you see some really strange things that people, you know, similar to sometimes I used to speak to people about recruitment processes, and they go, I could just tell from their eyes they weren't going to, you know, you could hear that.
I said that last night in the episode I was watching, the eyes. Yes, so I'm now doing it myself.
I assume you don't do that in recruitment processes.
No, I definitely don't.
But it's those kind of notions that we are just good at telling everything about a person from a small interaction, and we discount the context that they're going through, or the reasons they might be doing things, and look at it through some quite tight lenses. So there's something about learning around decision making. There's something, as you kind of both touched on, around trust as well. How do you choose how to trust, and who to trust, and how quickly? Do you consider it important to, because there are different ways of thinking about trust, default to I will trust you unless you show otherwise, or do you think that trust needs to be earned in organisations?
I think I generally default to I will trust you. I think you've got to, haven't you, really? Unless somebody from the outset shows you a reason why you couldn't trust them. But yeah, I think, you know, in business and in organisations, you're working as part of a team, you trust each other, you support people, expect them to support you, and that builds that trust. So yeah, I think unless it does get to a point where somebody shows you that they can't perhaps quite be trusted, my default would be to trust people from the outset.
Yeah, it's such a great question. I really agree with what you said. I think it's so critical for all leaders, you know, not just us in people and culture, to show that trust to people that are within the organisation, to allow them to feel trusted. It means they can perform better and do better. I think I've definitely experienced times in my career where I've thought, I think I've broken a bit of trust there and I need to work to get it back. But it's made me perform less, I would say. So I think you're absolutely right. We should be giving trust until a person may show us something different.
And it just builds learning experiences as well, doesn't it? It's, you know,
it really does.
The more you trust people, you know, they empowered to get on with their job. They can make a mistake and learn from that, and it's all part of the whole sort of trust cycle, I think.
That is really important, the making a mistake, because it happens all the time. It's totally normal, and building that culture to let people know that's okay. You're not going to be blamed, but we're going to reflect and learn, and we're going to move on. I think that is so important.
And talking openly about those mistakes as well. So one of the things that happens on Traitors is quite often because people want to, if they have made a mistake, they're really open about talking about it because they want other people to understand why it was that they created that situation. Potentially it's important for them because the judgment happens the very next day. But just in organisations, there's a same thing that happens in Traitors to a degree, which is you're working with people who've got a combination of commitment to an organisational goal, commitment to rewards for themselves, but also with a value set that might be slightly different to your own. And there's an interplay between those three things. And quite often one of the things you're trying to do is work out from the people around you what they're leaning into. So some people it's just, I want to get on with my career. Other people are, proper, dedicated to the company. And then you've got people, I guess, with some very hard value sets and principles, and some people who are maybe a bit more fluid. I think you see that coming a lot in Traitors. What do you favour in your organisations or where you've worked with? Because I think it's possible for any of those types of people to be a success in an organisation. There's always a blend. But do you think that those people who are kind of more focused on the organisation are useful? Is it the people that actually really want to get on as long as you point them in the right direction? Or is it a combination of things?
I think it's a combination of things, actually. I think, within every organisation, every team, you've got those people who come in, they're very values driven, they very ambitious, they want to get ahead in the organisation, in their profession, whatever it might be, whether it's HR or finance, or they've got a passion for that sector, whether it's health or education or whatever it might be. And then you've also got people who want to come into work, do that job. Yes, they might be aligned with the values of the organisation as well, but they might not just have that same ethos. But I think, if every organisation, everybody was that ambitious and trying to, grapple their way to the top, then that just wouldn't work. You need that balance of the sort of different types of colleagues within teams and organisations.
You don't want people murdering each other.
You don't want people, no.
Oh, no. I mean,
you don't want people murdering each other, trying to banish each other along the way so they can get to the top.
Yeah, exactly. I agree with what you both have said, actually. And where I've had success with this is sort of accepting that people all have different motivations. Where I've had success is recruiting for the values of the company. So making sure your recruitment process, your hiring managers are all fully trained on how to understand if a candidate fits your organisational values. Then, of course, there's a competence side. They need to be able to do the job as well. That's quite important, isn't it? But I've seen the most success through successfully trying to marry those two things together, and then just accepting there are people that will come in at 9 and leave at 5. It's absolutely fine. And then there are other people that want to climb the ladder, and you need them all. You need all of those types of people in your organisation.
I think the formation of subgroups is a really interesting thing. So you quite often get those tight groups of 3 or 4 people.
Yes.
And they are utterly confident that they are thinking about things in the right way. They're confident that actually people in that group have got the right ideas and the right values, and therefore the problem is a threat elsewhere. And I think that you quite often get that fragmentation in organisations, even within broader groups. So it might be that you've got 10 or 12 people on a leadership team, or it might be that you've got different teams that kind of come together. And I think you see some of that playing out and how quickly it happens as well.
The subgroups worry me because I feel that their narrative then becomes their reality, and it's not necessarily aligned with the overall goals of the organisation. So that bit in the current episode, we're seeing that start to form now, and it does it worries my little HR heart when I watch it in the evenings.
Because I think what's interesting in the Traitors, without wanting to give away any spoilers,
please
last
don't
night's
spoil it,
episode,
please.
David, once you've got those groups formed and all those subgroups, that narrative does start to move in a different direction. It can quite quickly sort of flip from one person being the traitor to, coming round the round table, full circle, to now it's Jim over here. He's now the traitor, and everybody follows. And actually nobody thought that originally. And so I think when you get those subgroups, it's just being mindful of the narrative that they are creating. And it's the same within organisations and employee engagement, and the narrative that different groups or different colleagues in the organisation or leaders in the organisation create. And actually, thinking about whether that is the right thing to do or it is the right message.
Yeah. And how people develop sources of power. Just through conversation, just through relationships and exposure, because you've got a group of people thrown together, and then within 3 or 4 days you've got leaders emerging from those groups, and people saying, no, I trust them or not, and there's suspicion over those leaders, or there's trust, and all of that happens. I won't say organically, because it's such a forced premise, but it's very human in terms of the things that are happening. So we're going to move on to talking about the economy. However, as long as there aren't spoilers, and I can feel people kind of dodging around it, and I really appreciate that. The problem is we can edit it out from the broadcast, we can't edit it out from my memory, and that's the thing that's going to talk more broadly about economic conditions. So in lots of parts of the world at the moment, there are either choppy economic conditions or uncertain. In the UK, there's been some recent reports that have suggested that business certainty is not where it would ideally be as we head into a new year. And there are a number of reasons for that, some of which are related to people costs. So changes in national insurance, and challenges as well in terms of the labour market at large, in terms of access to skills. So businesses have been quite vocal about the fact that it may be a very difficult year coming up, and there are difficult choices that they may have to make. At the CIPD, we pulled together a group of probably about 20 or 30 CPOs, HRDs at the start of the week, and spoke to them about what was high up on their agenda for the coming year, and this was a framing for it. Equally, we've got some more data that will come out and we'll keep providing you throughout the year around confidence in hiring and things like that. But I just wanted to open up a conversation, I guess, initially around what are the messages that organisations should be sending out. So how are you honest with people, but also don't, I suppose the old version of the word would be don't spook the horses, I think is probably what would have been used at the start of my career. So how do you have openness and transparency in organisations whilst also giving people confidence? And then I want to talk a little bit about actually the impact on skills and how do you lead through this, but also how do you build skills in an organisation over time when it can be quite difficult to hold on to people, or you have to really look after potentially a smaller group of people than you would have done prior.
I think it is important to communicate to colleagues about the impact of any change. So whether that be, national insurance contribution and cost pressures around that. We're at the time of year now where everybody's budgeting, they're doing their huge big exercise that everybody loves, working out all their budgets for next year. So everybody will have calculated those NI changes into their budgets for next year. And I do think it is important to just update colleagues. You don't have to go into too much detail with them and bore them to death with numbers. But I think if organisations aren't transparent with colleagues, they will make up their own narrative about what the impact is going to be, whether that's, cut in learning budgets or a redundancy or whatever it might be. So I think, chief execs or whoever in the organisation, I think it's really important for them to be transparent with colleagues, but actually do it in a sort of really digestible way. Depending on the size of organisations, you have colleagues who are out there on the front line sometimes, maybe in the NHS or in housing, for example, and you have other colleagues who are office-based, and, those are the ones that will probably see leaders maybe more often than others. So I think however you do it, it's a range of different communications so that everybody understands, but do it in a really sort of digestible, easy way, and just make sure you're giving that reassurance to colleagues.
And similar to Traitors, he says, just bring it back. It's about developing that sense of shared purpose as well.
Yeah,
isn't it? So it's not the organisation is trying to do this and it might have an impact on you. It's actually, we all need to be conscious of costs.
Yes,
we all need to be focused on the opportunity. We kind of succeed or fail together.
Yeah, businesses have been left with some really tricky decisions to make this year, and I think you're absolutely right. All of us need to get hold of the narrative very, very quickly, because otherwise people will start to make up their own narrative, which will lead to, just won't lead to good things. My background in hotels, there is always something in every year that really impacts the economy and affects travel and tourism as well. So I learned some hard lessons very early on about transparent communication, about speaking to what communication means to each level of employee, but how out of a really tricky situation you can garner loyalty and employees that will stay with you for a long time if you bring them on that journey with you, speak to them in their language about what these cost reductions might mean for them. And often, always, in fact, these employees are at the coalface, if you like, every day. So they are going to have the best ideas of how we could maybe save some money, do things a bit differently, make efficiencies. I was also thinking about COVID, which was a very long time ago now, but the different ways we had to be so creative with communication, and we couldn't get to each other. We had to do it all digitally. So we are used to doing this. And luckily now we can be together to have these conversations and to communicate. So it's not something new, but it needs a lot of thought, because if you get it wrong, it can be really devastating.
Yeah, and like you said, the business impacts of getting it wrong.
Yeah,
loss of talent, risk to performance, loss of alignment, missed opportunity are really significant, aren't they?
Yes.
So, pressure comes into that system, how you react to that, and whether that shapes better outcomes or whether that pushes us into a worse place and people start panicking or people start checking out.
I think that's a good point there about engaging colleagues in that discussion and asking for ideas. It just sort of, I guess, fosters a sense of joint responsibility, doesn't it? And you mentioned, David, at the start that, during the communication, it's, our budgets are tight, we have to make savings. And I think if everybody has that shared sense of responsibility, it just feels a little bit easier, and it's not a message that's coming down from the top that this is what we are doing unto you, sort of thing.
So one of the things that no one's thinking about in Traitors is
we're obsessed.
I think I'm on a relatively safe wicket here, which is long-term strategic workforce planning. So it just doesn't come up much. They might think about.
But they are, David, because last night they were advertising for people for next season. That's long-term workforce planning.
I'll let you get away with that without it being a spoiler. I was panicking for a moment, but no one's really thinking beyond 2 weeks. And one of the problems, I think, when organisations and us as people are under pressure is that our planning horizon tends to shrink and we tend to look at the immediate problem but not the ramifications. We know that from our surveys of members in the profession, one of the things that organisations are most concerned about is quality of leadership and management skills, just because of the challenges that we have at the moment. Because that is going to be your key for getting the most from people. That's a long-term challenge together with investment in people's development. How do you have the conversations in an organisation where money's tight to show that actually we need to keep investing in learning and development of our people? Otherwise, actually, there's a long-term impact to that. It's tricky because people are looking to save money. It's often said that's one of the first areas to be cut. But actually, what's really interesting, I think, from recent conversations is it's the first time I'm speaking to people and they're going, that's the thing that we need to protect.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think a lot of employee retention strategies and learning and development initiatives need to cost money. It is so true what you're saying. We can be so short-termist, can't we, when we're faced with a big problem, but actually we've got to think that the world's going to carry on, and we need to think about our businesses and protecting the future. There's so much talent within organisations that I think is under leveraged to grow teams. And my strength might not be our CFO's strengths, and our managing director's strength, but actually, what could we do to have conversations with leaders, again, reinforcing values, what's important right now, because I think we have quite a young leadership team sort of within our homes, and they've never seen stuff like this before, and they tend to shy away from it. So I think we've got we've all been around the block a few times. Just apologise to my colleagues for saying that. And we've got that experience that we can impart to them. That does not have to cost money. That's maybe a cup of coffee and a conversation and some coaching. And I think senior leadership has got a big responsibility to think about how they could deliver that and to help that.
I've said to a few people over the last few years, if you can't afford upper quartile pay, and many organisations can't, it doesn't mean you can't afford upper quartile care and investment in terms of time and emphasis on people. But I know you and Andrea, you've done a lot in terms of long-term planning for people and pieces, I know, in recent roles. I was wondering if you could kind of bring that to life for people.
Yeah, so at CIPD Housing Association, and I guess, this is something maybe people can think about if, as you say, the first thing people look at is a cut in L&D budgets. And I think in most organisations I've worked in, that's probably been the case at some point in the past. But at Peabody, during the recent merger, I say recent, a couple of years ago now, with Catalyst Housing, I wanted to take a little bit of a different approach and look at how we could deliver learning and development on a more cost-effective basis. So I'm sure many organisations are in the same boat. They have an apprenticeship levy, which they don't fully utilise. I think we're losing about 40k a month, something like that, in levy. we did use it. We had people doing MBAs through the apprenticeship levy. We had apprentices that we brought in, but not in big cohorts. But we were losing a lot of money. And obviously post-merger, you have to make savings. That's the point of most mergers. So I established the Peabody Academy. So Peabody became an employer provider, Ofsted regulated academy, which means that Peabody now employs tutors or teachers directly, and they directly deliver the apprenticeships. So instead of colleagues going off for 1 day a week to college or to an FE provider for their off-the-job training, they just stay in Peabody and do it. So not only is that sort of more cost effective, it creates a sort of a more or less cost neutral model. It's much more flexible. It creates much more flexibility in, they don't have to go off for 1 day. They can do their off-the-job learning through, maybe, I know we were talking earlier about inductions, that could be counted towards their off-the-job learning. It could be something like a toolbox talk if you work in property services. So it creates much more flexibility and a much more cost-effective model. So I think organisations now, if they are finding that L&D budgets are being cut, one of the things to look at is how can they better use their apprenticeship levy. We know that there are changes coming down the line through the whole sort of apprenticeship framework, and I would really welcome that because I think it's a little bit too rigid at the moment. I don't think you have the flexibility within how apprenticeships are set up to be able to use the levy in the best way. So I think that would be one to watch over the next few months or so.
Yeah, completely. And please do keep following the CIPD's channels for kind of our position on the levy and updates on how it's changing. And I think what's really important because there'll be organisations potentially listening to that who go, that's a great idea, maybe we could do that. And there'll be other organisations going, that's a size and scale that we're not close to.
Yeah.
But what's at the heart of that is not going, there's a cost challenge, so therefore that goes, but going, there's a cost challenge, how do we think differently to preserve and continue that investment in people over time? We're going to move on to a section that we call Is It a Thing? So we do it on a regular basis, and we take a terminology that's been used out in the world quite often on TikTok. It does tend to be on TikTok, actually. And we say, look, is this a real thing happening in organisations? And the one we're looking at this week is the deceptive practice of corporate catfishing. So that's where a company misrepresents its corporate culture or identity to potential job candidates, creating a gap between the image of the work environment they project and the reality within the organisation. So we make it look like it's brilliant to work here, and then you turn up on your first day and actually it's
you get murdered.
It's a modern house, or you get murdered. It's that, isn't it? So question to both of you, is it a thing? Is the enduring question. But also I guess there's a bit for me, and we talked about it briefly before we started. Probably every organisation doesn't put its worst side like front and centre when it's trying to attract candidates.
Yeah.
You never see a come work here, competitive rates of pay, but also we had a really bad incident that happened last September because one, you hope that those incidents will never be repeated, but secondly, you are trying to attract people into come and work for you. So question to both of you, is it a thing? But also how catfishy would you need to be for it to be a catfish? Is the really clear question that I'm asking.
To be honest, I'd never thought about it before we were sent these sort of topics. But I guess you've got platforms now like Glassdoor and obviously LinkedIn where particularly on LinkedIn, organisations have their sort of corporate pages and they're posting their stories and their culture and their message and photos and all that. So if you are going to a certain organisation, being interviewed for a role, you do your research and you look at all that, and obviously that's all going to be positive. Glassdoor, you maybe again do your research and you could find some things on there that are positive or maybe not so positive, and those are from people who've maybe still work there or have worked there in the past. I think as you said, David, it's, you're not going to advertise a role and in your advert say, we got a 20% score on the engagement survey this year for, transparency or whatever it might be. So I don't know whether organisations deliberately do it. I suspect there is a little bit of maybe embellishing the truth sometimes in interviews, but I think by the same token, and as we were sort of saying before, that depending on what level role you're applying for in an organisation, if you're applying for a senior role, a director, or an executive team member or a chief executive, and you're going for an interview, you do expect whoever's interviewing you, be it chief executive or whoever, to talk to you about the challenges that are happening in the organisation, because if you're going for a senior role, you might be going in to fix something. Whereas, if you're coming in at a more junior level, you wouldn't expect to get that level of detail in an interview.
Yeah, and quite often those senior roles, the job advert would read going through an exciting period of change or something like that, wouldn't it? Kind of, you get to recognise the language and go, okay, so they didn't make any money last year, so what's going to happen next?
Yes. I think corporate catfishing is a thing, and I think we are all doing it, even though we don't mean to, and we're doing it with the best of intentions, but actually the extreme outcome could be making a hire that you just lose trust with immediately because you've sold them the dream, and that's not the reality. So I had to Google catfishing, and the two teenagers in my house helped me with this as well. And then on reflection, I realised that I've done it twice myself in the last couple of years at my new company.
So you're a serial catfish,
yes,
so
I am.
This podcast is no longer a Traitors special. It's now called Confessions of a Serial Catfisher.
Again, just linking it to what I said with the best of intentions. So since I joined the company I work for, we've opened up 2 later living care homes. And we had a huge lessons learned from the first one. We really sold the candidates that came in the dream that we were new to the sector. We're very lucky we have a lot of capital behind us, and we're trying to do something very, very different that the sector hasn't seen before. But what we forgot to tell them was that when they joined us, actually the home wouldn't be opening for a couple of weeks, and they would be part of the team that would help us get everything ready. And then very slowly we would build up the resident community. So this was a disaster because I'd forgotten to tell them that they wouldn't be able to come in and do what they do best every day. And I really believe that people's number one thing that they want to get out of their work is to be able to deliver meaningful work. And I wasn't allowing them to do that because often they weren't working in their job roles. So when we came to open our second home, we had very honest conversations with the team, and a few people selected themselves out. It's not what they wanted to do. They didn't like the sound of the unpredictable environment, and they just wanted to come and give care, which is what they which was their passion. So retention was much better in home number 2 because they knew what they were going to be coming into. And as the resident community builds, I see them all really coming to light because they're so excited to welcome residents and to care for them. My second, I feel terrible. My second.
I'm on the edge of my seat. This is shocking.
Well, I know. My second misdemeanor was around induction. When I joined the company, I was asked to put together an induction to really bring the company's values to life. And it's just 2 things that I'm really passionate about, L&D and culture and values. So I was on cloud 9. I felt like Willy Wonka. And unfortunately, I did create a dream of the chocolate factory. And we had a really wonderful induction that we got super feedback on. So I was delighted. But when I went to check in on those employees at the end of week 1, week 2, and I would say to them, how is it going? How is your training going? Do you feel happy? They would say, no, Emma, I don't. This is just not how I thought it would be. And I just thought, oh my goodness, this is a disaster. What have I done? Anyway, I realised it wasn't a disaster. I unfortunately had forgotten to tell them about the reality of day-to-day coming into an operating business, and that they have got their beautiful orientation and their 100-day learning journey, but actually there are going to be many days in the week where that will be interrupted because something will happen. However, there'll be a learning opportunity within that. And I'm saying this out loud now thinking, what was I thinking? But actually we've changed the orientation now, and the recent cohorts that have come in are much happier because we've sort of told them how the reality will be. So I feel much better now. I feel like I've absolved myself.
Yeah, I mean, it is that middling piece where you are open enough and honest enough to show a good plausibility, that's what tells me you're not a traitor.
Thank you.
That's kind of the bit where I go, you're not trying too hard. I think is kind of part of that. So we're going to close this episode here. Thank you so much for your time and expertise. Have you got any final thoughts just before we stop on Traitors that have come up as we've gone through? Or any tips or things that people should be watching for as professionals as it progresses?
Yeah, I think I've gone too deep on my expectations of it, because they don't have a common purpose, the faithful and the traitors. So there's never going to be a happy ending. Sorry, this has just dawned on me whilst we were talking. So I'm not happy about this now, because what's going to happen? Well, you know more than me what's going to happen. But it's made me realise that common purpose is so important, isn't it? And they just don't have a common purpose.
So there's a lack. So we're watching Traitors and we're thinking it's a lack of strategic alignment from you is one of the takeaways. So yeah, very business focused.
I agree. Sometimes lack of strategic alignment, although ideally they should be all working towards a common purpose, which is about £120,000, I think. But yeah, I think some of the things we've spoken about around like communication and not making early judgments, transparency, all that sort of aligns with business. I think I will be eagerly watching over the next few days to see how it all pans out.
Yeah, definitely. The OD practitioner in me also, I'm fascinated by the prevalence and power of stories in it. The ability for people to weave a narrative saying, I saw that, and therefore maybe that means that. And then if I put that together with that thing, and then people's ability to sell that to other people in a short amount of time, I think that tells us a lot about the dynamics of an organisation day to day, where people are filling in those gaps. And to the point that both of you have been made, that's why that openness and communication is so important. So thank you so much for coming in. I look forward to next time you come in as well. And thank you so much for allowing me an evening with my daughter watching 3 episodes without me having to sit there pretending I don't know what's going on. So all that's left to say is thank you very much for your time. There's more detail on everything that we've spoken about today, actually bar Traitors, if I'm being honest, on the CIPD's website, which we've improved the accessibility of in terms of discovery over the last few months. I also wanted to give a shout out to, we've got a new mentoring scheme, and I know that Andrea's signed up as a mentor for us. If you would like to sign up as we go through some challenging times to help the next generation of the profession understand what's going on, enhance their skills and do that piece that we talked about, long-term planning, then please do make contact with us and sign up for it. It's painless, but it's entirely beneficial for the members that you'll be supporting. We publish new episodes of this every fortnight. It's on YouTube as well now, so you can watch it if that's your preference. I was ill over Christmas. I do look this pale, so you don't need to adjust any settings if you've been watching in that case. But otherwise, my name's David D'Souza, and this has been the CIPD's HR People Pod. Thank you very much.